Anti-Asian racism is increasing. Over the past 12 months, reports of discriminatory incidents in Canada have more than tripled, according to a study led by researchers at the University of Toronto and U of T's Dalla School of Public Health. And the reason for the increase, according to the authors of the report, is COVID-19. Anti-Asian racism, unfortunately, is not new to Canada. People of Chinese descent have experienced racism, segregation, intimidation, violence, and even murder because they were, well, Chinese. You know, the Canadian government officially introduced the Chinese Immigration Act in 1885, which imposed a heavy head tax on anyone from China that wanted to come here. And in 1923, the act banned Chinese immigrants from Canada altogether. The act was repealed in 1947 when Chinese people were allowed to become Canadian citizens. But despite the citizenship rights, it still wasn't until 1962 that immigrants from China were really allowed into the country. In other words, as a country, we have been hostile, disrespectful, and physically aggressive towards people from China, up until about 60 years ago, when it started to change. Anti-racism discrimination started to fade. In fact, it faded so much that most young women and men of Asian ancestry or new immigrants rarely experience racism today. Or that was until COVID-19 dramatically changed the way Asian people are being treated. My guest today, Franco Ng, is one of the group of young people who says part of the problem is their generation needs to step up and get involved. He's co-chair of the Youth Forum for Asian Representation, and one of his co-chairs, Lauren C., says a lack of Asian representation across all spectrums of Canadian government has hindered the ability for the community to effectively address the rise of anti-Asian hate crimes. I invited Franco Ng to join me for a conversation that matters and a conversation that affects all of us about how we address anti-Asian racism. Franco, welcome to Conversations That Matter. We are seeing a rise in discriminatory acts directly related to people of Asian ancestry. How bad is it getting right now from your perspective? And thanks for having me, Stu. The story that I like to share the most is that every week for the past 20 years, I have dim sum with my family, with my grandparents in Richmond. We pick a restaurant and we go. And it's the usual conversation, the topics. And when COVID-19 happened, it became more so concerned about their physical health. Mm-hmm. And ensuring my grandpa loves to walk around town and to have his daily exercise. But recently, in the past few months, the conversation shifted. And we began talking about how do we protect his physical safety. And my grandpa expressed worry and fear, frankly. He said that, I don't know if I should look someone in the eye anymore because I'm not too sure what might happen to me. And for us as younger folks, we're not afraid. We're not the targets, and we can see from the rise it's the elderly, it's females that are getting targeted from these frankly grotesque attacks. Yes. And for us, that really hits home. And seeing that attack in San Francisco with the grandma, and she was screaming and bloody, and she tried to fight back, and just thinking that being my grandfather, right? And I just felt compelled to be able to speak up and do something about it. Well, you did do something about it. You've decided to stand up and respond to it. Tell us about the forum that you are putting together right now. You talk about the conversation that you have with your grandfather, but what then pushed you to say, okay, we've got to do something. We've got to get other people involved because it's a chorus of voices that makes the difference. So tell us about the event and also what motivated you to be able to pull this together and rather quickly.
Yeah, well, when everything has been happening and we were thinking of all these different ways to mobilize my peers and youth to really look at that situation, ask ourselves, how do we contribute to this fight against anti-Asian hate? And it was very serendipitously, I've met Lauren and Brennan, the two young leaders who are really spearheading this operation, and they too share that same concern. And one thing that we realized is that, racism and prejudice isn't something that can be resolved overnight.
No.
It is something that requires proper representation. It requires proper leadership in order for us to sort of break through that barrier and have the proper representation to speak up about this issue. And when we looked at that, we also realized that there are certain cultural barriers, unique challenges as an Asian community that we have to overcome ourselves in order to attain representation. And when looking at that, we're like, well, as young people and the way that we were raised, what are some ways that we can break through these barriers, these cultural barriers to representation? And that's when we kind of came together and decided to put on this forum where we brought together, frankly, some movers and shakers from the business, government, and community to share a roadmap with young people to understand how do we achieve Asian leadership and representation.
Is it leadership and representation that is needed, or is that one component of a multifaceted approach to say, okay, this is a complex problem because we need to address society as a whole? So there's leadership and representation. What are some of the other pillars that are part of your strategy?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing that we're trying to get our own community to realize is that you have to not only speak up, but you have to take action. And a lot of times, very unfortunately, a lot of people within our community are either apolitical or they don't want to take a stance or step on anyone's toes, and that's just a very.
Why not?
It's a very cultural. It's a very cultural thing. There's a saying in Cantonese that says, if you're the bird that sticks your head out, you're going to get shot, right? And that's something that my parents repeated to me growing up. And to be a leader, you have to stick your neck out. You have to take a stance on something. Right. And a lot of times, I think, as a culture and as a community, we don't have that drive within us. We're scared of kind of stepping on someone's toes. But right now, what we're facing is attacks without provocation.
Right.
We're not sticking our necks out. We're not speaking out, but we're still victims of the issues of COVID-19 and the prejudice comes with it. So now it's understanding that now, and we now must step up and do something.
Okay, so there's a couple of components to that. One, you need to react in the moment, but how do you do that? And as you pointed out, it's women and the elderly who are being targeted by people who are taking what I consider to be ridiculously stupid shots at somebody that they're hoping to blame for something that they don't have control over. And so how do you address that? I wish I had the answer to that, because we're talking about individuals who make odd decisions in my mind, but there they are. And so I guess this, I'm answering my own question here, leads to we need to have greater and open discourse about the way that we need to treat one another, and the incredibly positive role that everybody who comes to Canada, whether they're of Chinese descent or anywhere else, when you come here, you're coming here to help make a better society and a better life for yourself.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think this conversation, and not just within an Asian context, but we see all the issues down south in America as well with the race relations and this concept of what does it mean to be an ally? How do I help other people that may not be within my own culture or my own race, but how do I support them? And the uplifting of one culture or one ethnic race does not mean the disfranchisement of the other, right? And a conversation that we had prior to sitting down for in this interview is the importance of learning and understanding each other's heritage and each other's background. And that's something that we're definitely encouraging with our forum, is that we hope that youth, and not just youth, but people across all ethnic communities, to understand where the people where the Chinese Canadians came from, where the Japanese Canadians came from, where the South Asians came from. And we all suffered as a group of Asians in varying ways, a sort of type of discrimination, as you mentioned, up until the 60s, right? Which is really just yesterday, if you really think about it. Yeah. So there's so much. But
it was only fading away. It didn't immediately go away.
Exactly right. Yeah. Exactly right. And I'm a firm believer of history and heritage. And until you can really understand where a certain group of people come from, you can never really truly relate to why they act a certain way now. And I think that's something that, to address your question, how do we on a broader scale ensure that we're preventing these attacks in a sustainable way, is to have that part of our education, whether that's formally within an education system or visiting sites like the Storytelling Center in Chinatown that will be opening up. And I think that is very important for people to get an understanding.
I agree with you. So, a good friend of mine, Mafalda Arias, she is a cultural integration specialist. And she works with companies to say, okay, you have people who are from Peru and others from the United States and somebody else from Germany and someone from China, all working together in the same company. How do you start to create an understanding of one another's cultures and develop a common language where when you say something, you're both saying the same thing?
Right.
But she said, we have a problem in Canada. We want to believe that we're colorblind, that we're not racist. And if we don't identify the problem, how then can we address it? And is that one of your objectives? Let's not pretend that there isn't anti-Asian sentiment out there. Let's highlight it, address it, and then open up a platform for discussion.
That's exactly right, and I think the first step is awareness. And in the beginning, I spoke about within our own community being aware of our own cultural barriers and things that we have to overcome.
Right.
But in a broader community, is exactly what you just said. How do we raise awareness of the actual issues that are frankly quite prevalent within our society, but it was just covered up. And what happened with COVID-19 was that it just reared its ugly head and it just came out in the open, and it came, raging and roaring, and it came. And that's something that we have to be, like you said, made aware of first and accept. I think that's something is very important as well. As Canadians, we live in a mosaic of cultures.
Yes, we do.
I feel very blessed. I can go down out to Surrey for some amazing traditional South Asian food. I go to Richmond and I have some amazing Chinese food and Asian food there, right? And I think for me to be able to experience all of that, really frankly, in just one place is a blessing. But aside from just enjoying each other's cultures, we have to learn about each other's struggles. And that's something that I think is sorely lacking right now within society.
Well, and if we have a common goal, that we understand one another and recognize that we are building a society together, one where we're not in competition with one another that you win, I lose, but rather if you win, I win as well, because we're not living in a land where there isn't abundance. It's if you create abundance, well then I get to share in an expanded economy and a better quality of life. So even if I'm looking at it from my own selfish interests, I can go, I want you to succeed because when you do, so do I.
Right, and one thing that to speak towards that is, I think cultural aptitude is very important. I think someone, a new immigrant coming over, he or she unlocks the doors to another market, another country. They have the language and the culture to be able to connect Canada to a completely different world, and they actually add a lot of value to what we have here as a society. And as you said, on an economic standard, be able to raise our standards of living by unlocking those market opportunities for our communities.
Right.
And I think that's something that should be celebrated and believe in the strength of our diversity. If they, I never understood, if someone spoke English with an accent, that's something that is something to be made fun of. And that's something that I never understood, because they have another language that they can speak. They're adding value in a different way.
Right.
And we should, again, celebrate that.
Yes, we should, because English is such an adaptive language. It will borrow from every single language that there is and create new elements of it. And it's so magnificent when we embrace that, rather than say, oh, how come you don't speak the way that I do? As a matter of fact, it's a good thing that you don't, because then what you're doing is you're sharing a perspective that may enrich us all.
Exactly, and that's the conversations that we need to have. And I think, going back to our forum and what we're trying to accomplish there, when we were picking out our guests and our panelists, we try to get as broad of a picture as possible, whether they're from government or from business, or we have a panel of youth leaders who are coming out to share their perspective. We want to ensure that everyone's voices are heard and everyone can relate and have a roadmap to be part of the change.
Okay, let's talk about the event. Who are some of those? I mean, it looks like an all-star cast to me. Let's talk about some of the people that you've got there. And I want to start by acknowledging Carol Lee, because you mentioned the storytelling, the Chinatown Storytelling Center. It was a magnificent tribute to the lives and the contribution of so many people who've been coming here for generations. So I know that Carol's on your list, but let's go beyond Carol.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to your point, Carol has done such amazing work in the revitalization of Chinatown and ensuring that we're maintaining our heritage in Vancouver, with the Chinatown Foundation. And our forum is completely free, but we do have a fundraising tickets that will enter you into a prize draw, and all the proceeds will go towards the Chinatown Foundation.
Fantastic.
So that's definitely a point. And a cheers to Carol. And of course, the next person that we have to thank is Dr. Brant Louie, who's a chairman of London Drugs. And when speaking with Dr. Louie, he expressed that this is a topic that's near and dear to his heart, and it's something that his family have been trailblazers of, this idea of Asian representation.
Yes, they are. I mean, you take a look at the contribution of the Louis family, and going back to Brant's grandfather and the role that he played in helping so many other families become successful and amazing contributors to our society. The fact that you have Dr. Louie there is a remarkable testament to what it is that you're doing.
Right, and he's rightly so was a torchbearer, and yes. I think what we really wanted to do with our forum is for younger folks like myself that maybe don't have that strong affinity to the Louie family, hear the stories again of what they have done, and to be inspired by what they have done, and then recognize our own responsibility to do more.
Yes.
Because the conversation needs to be continued, and there's more work to be had.
And it is a remarkable story.
Exactly right. Yeah. So Dr. Louie again is one of our keynote speakers and a patron for our forum. We also have on a governmental level, Minister Bardish Chager, Minister of Diversity, Inclusion, and Youth.
Great.
And as well as Minister Bowen Ma, who's the youngest member of legislature, female and Asian. So she is a pioneer.
And she's an engineer, as I understand.
She is an engineer as well. So very fitting for Minister of Infrastructure. But I think she is such an inspiration for younger folks like myself, especially females who may not view governance as something that is down within their career path.
You're right.
But her being in that position is such a symbol for all of us with Asian backgrounds to understand that we, no matter what Asian background, can achieve, a level of representation that she has not achieved.
Didn't I see Jenny Kwan's name on there as well?
Of course, remember probably Jenny Kwan and what she has done for Vancouver and Chinatown, and she has for the past 23 years been the voice for our community in Parliament about our needs and what we are going through as a community. She is also part of our governance panel. So when you say all-star cast, I think we've really touched every corner.
Oh yeah, okay, but we can't leave out Mi Jung Lee. Now
that's right.
I worked with Mi Jung many years ago at BCTV, which is now global, but before she went on to her fantastic career at CTV. But she is an extraordinary example of a Canadian who has done so well and been a voice for her community, which is Korean, not Chinese, but
that's right.
she is, within the Asian circle of countries.
Yeah, and we actually made it a point when we were again finding our all-star cast is media. We really wanted someone from the side of the media industry to be a part of it because they are on the face of television, and when families and kids are watching TV and they see the representation on that level, they envision themselves to be in her shoes, and we wanted someone of Mi Jung's stature to be able to come out and to share her story of climbing up the ranks to be a co-anchor on CTV News. And how was she able to achieve that? And that's no small feat as well.
As you say that is such a remarkable point. I'm reminded of a conversation that I had with Vancouver Police Deputy Chief Steve Rye. So he's second in command VPD. And I was telling them that I was doing an interview with Wally Opal, who has, past Attorney General and so on, and judge and justice and headed up a number of commissions. And Steve said, I used to watch Wally on TV when I was a kid, and I went, well, that guy's a brown guy, and he seems to be able to do anything he wants. I guess that means I can too.
That's right.
Because it's inspirational to see other people that you can identify with because they help to motivate you to be all that you can become. And I think that is important. If we look at the idea that if everybody can realize their full potential and they're motivated to do so and they believe that opportunity is there, well, then all of society benefits.
That's right. And one thing that we also did for this forum as well is to understand, our audience. Of course we welcome everyone, but we really want to mobilize youth.
Yeah.
And we really want, high school, university, and young professionals to tune into this event. And what we did was that we reached out to a brand new, a very popular influencer group called Canto Mando. And they're about 25 years old, but they are stars on YouTube, and they have about 600,000 followers that are Asian Canadian. They're local from Toronto, but recently moved to Vancouver as well, and they've been super supportive of this event. And we're trying to be the bridge. This forum is really trying to be the bridge. You have your traditional media, you have your governments and your traditional business, but then we also have your new age influencers who they in themselves hold so much weight these days with younger folks like myself, and have them step up and to share their story in this new age, I think is something that is special.
Okay, how important is it that people who are not Asian, of Asian ancestry, also participate as part of the audience? Because this is something that affects all of us. All Canadians were impacted by this, and we have to collectively work towards addressing it.
That's right, and it goes right back to the conversation of being an ally. And what does it mean to be an ally? It's not just to reshare on Instagram or to make a post. It is to have a good understanding, and I think personal stories go a very, very long way, especially personal stories of your neighbor beside you, Dr. Brand Louie, who's been a staple here in Vancouver, understanding where he and his family came from. I think that is so much more impactful.
Carol Lee and her family.
Carol Lee and her family as well. Same journey as well. So to understand all of that as a non-Asian person, I think is very important as well. Yeah.
Well, I agree, and I wish you great success with this, and I hope that it is one of many to come, because this cannot be just a one-time message. It's something that we collectively have to continue to repeat. And that is, we hear this motto around addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, we're in this together. Well, we're in this together for more than just addressing COVID. We're in this together because we are Canadians.
That's right. And I always say we have to believe in the strength of our diversity. We have to understand that everyone, if they come from a different background, is adding much more value to our country than, like you said, it's not a zero-sum game. They're not taking away, right?
They're adding to.
They're adding to. Yeah. And that's something that is very important and we have to realize. So, if everyone is free on May 29th, then definitely come out. It's going to be live streamed on.
We'll put the address on the bottom of the page.
That's right, on the bottom of the page, and definitely spread the word, right? And we're trying to raise a little bit of money for the Chinatown Foundation as well. So I think that's very needed. They're supporting a lot of seniors during this time, during COVID-19, and they're the most vulnerable group as well. Yeah.
Well, I applaud your efforts, what you're doing, and congratulations. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.